This movie, you've been sitting on it for a while, right? Like this was something that you've been, working on, or it's been in development for a while. It's been, done, basically produced for a little while. How long has this been you've been waiting for this moment, this week?
It's been a while. It's been a while. So maybe about 12 years ago, maybe even more, my father called me. He's like an old school Italian guy, loved boxing. We used to sit in and watch the Duran, the Hagler, the Leonards, like that era of fights. And, right before Tyson kind of came. And he was a big fight fan. And then one day he called me and he said, Jim, you got to look at this fighter, Willie Pep, Italian American, East Coast, most wins, broke his back in a plane crash, came back and won another 100 fights, had six wives, lost all his money, had to come out of retirement. Just look him up. And I'm like, all right, Dad. So I printed out his picture and I put it on my desk. And Steve Loft, a buddy of mine, who's now my producing partner, was visiting me and he saw the picture. He said, Jim, that looks just like you. Who is the guy? And I said, well, that's Willie Pep. And we looked him up and we saw this. And then that's when we started developing it. And then obviously in this industry, no one's going, James Madio, let me give you $40 million to be a lead in a movie that takes place over 3 decades, because I said it before, there's only three directors that can get the money to shoot for 3 decades, and that's Coppola, Scorsese, and Spielberg. I mean, no one's doing 3 decades. I'm not going to play 18, lose all the weight, then have 5 months to put the weight back on and shut down production. I'm not going to have the fitness trainer. I'm not going to have the nutritionist and the cook. I'm not going to get any of that. This is a small independent film. So we tailored our expectations and came across this sort of faux docudrama thing. Like suppose Sports Illustrated back in the day knocked on Willie Pep's door in 1965 with a documentary crew and said, let's go see where Willie Pep is today. And Willie answers the door and he's excited. He's living with his mother, right? He's on his fourth wife. He's about to divorce him. His son is on drugs. His father's sick. He's got no money. He's living with his mom. So he thought this was an opportunity to sort of spotlight things and bring this documentary crew into his life. Thus, sort of things are falling apart. And now he's got to make a comeback to the ring, which in 1965 was a New York Times top 10 human interest story, was the return of Willie Pep to the ring. So we fell on him in that, and we just flashed back to his greatness with some found footage and documentary stuff, sort of tailored and made. So it's very art house.
And you mentioned this, like sometimes actors have to change mannerisms, hairstyle, whatever. Will Smith with Ali, Mark Wahlberg playing Mickey Ward. You are Willie Pep, James. Like you are, like you could pass as his brother. It seems just like naturally. What did you think when you first saw that picture of him?
Well, when I first saw the picture, I knew I looked like him. And then you get a deeper dive in him, and you're in the entertainment world. I'm an actor. I'm in the entertainment world. There's peaks and valleys. There's ups and downs. You got to reinvent yourself. Got to reinvent your career. You got to get in front of people. So there's parallel with Willie being up here, falling from grace, doing all that. So I could kind of run parallel with them. The difficulty with Willie is how special he was in the ring. There's nobody like him. No one will ever like him till today. He's a master, like a Da Vinci in there with his footwork, painting a canvas is what they say. He's one of Burt Sugar's favorite fighters. Well, it's a lot of people's favorite fighter. Custom, I love him as well. But his footwork was probably the hardest thing. But again, I'm protected by an edit. I'm protected by take one, take two, take three. But I took on that challenge. I wanted that challenge. I mean, like you said earlier, 13, 14 years trying to get this made. So I was able to do certain things on my own, like in my garage, put up a speed bag, get a rope, jog, shadow box, those things I could do without having any money, from production. Until you get to production, also you're like, hey, here's a jump rope, and you're like, from 1960. Like, yep, get ready to do it. Like, shit. And then the same thing with, speed bag, get this big old brown one that you had to do instead of these little Cobra ones, But yeah, it was definitely different.
What made him so interesting to you? I'm of the belief that like every single boxer, the great ones to the average ones, their lives could get the Hollywood treatment. They could be immortalized in cinema because nobody comes from the middle class into boxing. They all come from like the seventh circle of hell, and they go through a lot to get there. There's a film coming out later this year, Clarissa Shields, a women's champion. She's having her life given that kind of treatment. What was it about Willie's life that kind of jumped off the page to you that made you really want to invest in this role?
I think the way that he was raised is very similar to me on the East Coast streets, Italian American father. sports probably outgrew him. He wasn't going to play football, baseball, or basketball, obviously. And he recognized that he had this talent with his hands and his feet. And he went into a ring. And his main mission, this young man, this young kid who comes from the streets around the Depression era, started to make more money than his father and was actually hiding the money from it, realized how special he was. And when you look at a box's sort of, you just said it, they come from the earth. I mean, they come from the ground. They got to pick themselves up and rise up. And most of them fall from grace if not doing the right thing. For Willie and any boxer, I was always mesmerized by the idea that my job, in a sort of beautiful, poetic, barbaric sense, is to jump in this square ring. And my only mission, my mental mission, is to knock you in your face, put you on your ass for 10 seconds, victory, win, give me my money. Like, that's your job. Like, that's what you got to do. Like, you didn't go to college. You didn't, you got all of that. That's your job. I was always fascinated by that because I was a street kid. I fought a lot on the street, had 5 sisters. They were all really pretty. Everybody had something stupid about them. So I was fighting a lot with my hands. So I gravitated to that as well. Like, I could sense that Willie was bullied, and he hung out in Italian social clubs. I grew up in Italian social clubs. So really, I gravitated to him, man. I thought he was a good guy. And I kind of felt like I knew him. And then we shot in Hartford, where Willie's from. Mm-hmm. So now you're feeling the community rallied around us and this production and got behind us. And anybody knows, in a small independent film, you need a community. It takes a village. So we had people catering and holding areas and places to park your cars and dressing rooms. Like, everybody wanted to get this local hero's story made. And we would just tell them, our pitch to Hartford, and it's going to be done, was we want to do to Hartford, with Willie Pep to Hartford, of what Rocky Balboa did to Philadelphia. Mm. I mean, different. Obviously, he's not a real character, Rocky, but right now he probably is too fat. It's big.
Look, I believe that adds a measure of authenticity to everything, right? Like, they filmed part of The Fighter in Lowell, in Massachusetts, where Mickey Ward's from. Like, what did you gain from shooting, like, actually in the backyard of Willie Pep?
Yeah, you need that. I think you need that as like an artist, as an actor, because a lot of things that you're working on is the interiors, obviously. And then there's these exteriors. You're dressed up in the 60s. You got the hat, you got the walk, you got the mannerings. You're walking through the exact same frames that Willie walked through. You're turning knobs. You're eating at places. I jogged where Willie jogged. So you get a sense of his community and where he is, and it helps you stay in that character. I know it sounds like sort of method type stuff, but it helps you stay in that character and not lose focus of what the mission is and what the job is. A lot of people dependent on you when you get a lead in a movie, and to play this huge polarizing figure that's actually shooting in his local town where he's a hero. So there was pressure, a lot of pressure, but I was ready for it. I was accepting of it, and they were great. I mean, just shooting in Hartford, I don't know how we could have done it without Hartford.
And what's really interesting, I found about the film, is that Willie is a rare fighter. He's one of the great fighters of all time. But he deals with a very familiar problem, which is a fighter ending his career or her career and not knowing what to do next. Kind of just looking around going, well, I don't have any tangible skills. The only thing I know how to do is fight, but my body isn't letting me fight anymore. Like, what did you learn about kind of what he was going through during that period where his formative years were over, but he just couldn't give it up?
Yeah, and is there, speak to any boxer, and you know much more better than me, is I don't know if there's even a real answer to that, right? Because what do? You don't have any tangible skills. He doesn't want to greet people at a door and walk them to a table in a place that he always ate. He doesn't want to be a doorman, doesn't want to work at a desk at the Hilton. He doesn't want to do any of these. He wants to save face. He's got a lot of pride. You're champion of the world. Imagine this. And that it winds up becoming a sad fate, right, of each of them if they didn't do the right thing. Willie, to some degree, was to his own demise, gambled his money away. He had that great quote that says, "I made $1.2 million in my career. I spent 1.3 of it." It's just who he was. He got divorced 6 times. All his wives were younger than him. All his wives took the houses. He has another great quote that I say all the time is, as a fighter, first you lose your legs, then you lose your money, and then you lose your friends. I mean, think about that. And that's really it. So, he was his own worst enemy, and that's why he went back to the ring, right, Chris, to go win. He needed to win. He needed to feel that winning that winning spirit again. The only thing he knew how to do was win, because outside the ring, he's failing. Got a
Mm-hmm.
failed marriage. He's got a failed relationship with his kids. His father's passing away. He's failed finances. So it's not going his way. And then I don't want to give the movie away. End of the movie, what happens? Everybody goes away if you think about it. Think about where everybody goes. And where does he go? Goes back to where he wants to go. That was the most important thing to him. So I say this. I feel a lot in tune with Willie, but the one thing I don't feel with him, I think Willie put boxing over his family.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we separated, because he and I relationship with his son. He sent him to boarding school. He never went home. He was on the road. He was gallivanting, hanging out with, Jackie Gleason and Babe Ruth. He was doing all that kind of stuff. And Jake LaMotta and Marciano going out and partying with those guys. Not that he partied, drank, and he didn't drink or party, but he gambled and went out, frequented the nightlife. But that's what he did. Hung out with mobsters. So it's,
I love that early scene with Marciano where, he Willie's kind of hoping that Marciano picks up the tab. And Marciano makes him pick up the tab in the film. You mentioned how it's shot. It is filmed like it's a documentary. What do you think that added to it? What do you think that brought that was different? It's certainly a unique way to look at a fighter's life. What do you think that added to it?
Well, it's a very unique approach to the boxing genre. I don't know if it's been done exactly like that, set in that era. Not to my knowledge, maybe it has. And our approach was going back to pulling back expectations and what we can afford in the budget. So we fell upon this found footage docudrama approach. What it does for an actor is it opens up like a wealth of freedom, because it's different from what I'm accustomed to for 30 years, where you have to hit your mark, find your light. Speaking to an actor, don't spike the lens. This is opposite. That lens is another scene partner. The director I could speak to. I could throw these guys out of my house. Get out of my house. Go, get out. I have enough of you. I can break the fourth wall. All of this is so, it's new to an actor. We're not used to it. So it's like this combination of theater and film right in the middle. So there was a great freedom to it, but also a major concern. And that's where Robert Kolodny, the director, and the writer, Steve Loff, sort of gave me sort of a safe space and said, don't worry, we'll handle it. Because I say, listen, this is going on in my house. I wouldn't want you here. How are you going to shoot it? Because I'm going to tell you, if I see you, I'm throwing you out. Because that's how we shoot it, right? And he goes, yep, you do that. And same thing with all the other stuff. We're not giving it away. What's going on with me and my father. Me going into these bars looking for my son, these junkie places. And I'm like, no, you can't come in here. So it's up to them to do what they want to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. So I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And, I know some of the other actors have well enjoyed it.
Willie passed away in 2006, I want to say.
Yes.
Did you, how much did you get a chance to speak to people in his life, family members, to kind of immerse yourself in Willie Pep?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. We started developing this, I think, in 2009. So Willie had passed. He has family was around at the time. His son, Billy Jr., who was portrayed in the movie by Kia Gilchrist, was Billy Jr. was around. He was older. He was still dealing on and off with abuse. So he was tough to gather here or there, but he was great information about his father coming from his side, which was wonderful information for Steve Loff. His nephew Mike helped out. His wife Barbara was there. She was a plethora of information as well. And to get her blessing, like she came to set and saw me all dressed up as Willie. And she's looking at me, right? And I clock her in my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, I hope this woman and all of a sudden she looks at me, a little fiery redheaded girl, small Irish thing. She starts walking over to me. She looks up and down. She goes, yeah, you look like my Willie. You look like my yeah, baby. But it was shooting that way and trying to get the fabric and the skin and the cloth of Willie was just something that I just concentrated on daily. And I had a lot of time to do that. What I didn't want to do, because there's a lot of video on him, I didn't want to imitate him, because you can imitate him. He's very charactery with his hands, with his voice, with his cadence. He could be comedic in character. So I didn't really want that. But going back to what you said, the way that we shot it, that could save me from that as well, right? Because you see him playing the camera, then you see who the real Willie is when he's not playing the camera, so it kind of helped me.
Yeah, and when you're trying to kind of become this person? Like the fact that he had 6 wives is something. Like that speaks to something about him. What do you think that was?
You look at it now, they were all a lot younger than him. So I feel getting to know him and doing more research on him. Yeah, local hero, everybody praises him, but there's definitely a disconnect with that, no doubt. That people don't talk about. So internally, it was easy for him to tell Linda to go and do your thing, right? I mean, how simple it was. Was it eye candy on his arm? He liked that. He liked the idea of having a beautiful girl. Maybe it was the era or just the look of it. Or there's a psychosis problem going on with them. But 6 wives is a problem. I think Willie was a very flawed man. Absolutely flawed man. I mean, the funny story is I don't know if you read Friday Night Fights.
Oh yeah.
Great. Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, there's a great story that when he cracks up in a plane crash, he's all, dizzy and beat up. He said, when they first came to grab me, the first thing I was thinking about is, please don't go in my inside pocket. I got a nudie magazine in it. So, you know what I mean? He had a nudie magazine, he said, in his thing. And that's what he was worried about. So, maybe he was chasing too many women. He was distracted by that. And that was the cause of all his problems with his son and with his family, with all his wives.
What do you think do you think Willie Pep is an inspirational story? Do you think he's a cautionary tale? Maybe they're not mutually exclusive. Maybe he's a little bit of both. Like, how do you see his legacy?
Probably depends on your relationship with him or what you favor, what you lean into, right? I know both sides, so I could say, it's a cautionary tale. Yes, there's wonderful, beautiful things. He's a young man that made a life for himself, with shining shoes all the way to champion of the world, owns all these records, these accolades, once supposedly won a round without throwing a punch. By the way, I'd like to know what you think about that.
I would have a hard time scoring that. I'd say that. I don't know if I could score a round for a guy that didn't throw the punch. That's ring generalship, I guess, but I don't know if you could score it.
Yeah, I guess the thing is a lot of feints, made him miss and go through the ropes a few times, so it looked good, and was, getting it close, but never sort of tapped him. And 2 out of 3 judges. 2 out of 3, not all 3 judges. I think it was 2 out of 3 is what the factual thing is, but everybody says all 3 judges.
No CompuBox back then, though, so you never know what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a terrific film, James. You do a great job in that role. The Featherweight is in theaters now in New York, in Connecticut. You can catch it next week in Los Angeles. Great work, and I appreciate taking some time.
Chris, I appreciate this. Is a dream. I'm a big fan, huge boxing fan too as well. I follow you. I think I know you still got Crawford on top, which is a good thing. I have Crawford on top as well.
How do you think? Let me ask you this. Last thing for you. How do you think Willie Pep, as a boxing fan, fighting at featherweight, how do you think he would have been in this era? Because, there was a year I think he fought 15 times. He was fighting at 229, 230 wins is ridiculous. It's an insane number. How do you think his style would have translated to the modern day boxing game?
I think what would have happened is, first of all, it was 15 rounds and he fought every 3 weeks for 3 decades.
Incredible.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it. And obviously his thing was defensive, don't get hit, and that's how he lasts. He would take fighters, Chris. His thing was he would take fighters 15 rounds so that fighter can have a career after that. Say, I won 15 rounds with Willie Pep. He wasn't out for blood. And he even says that. I was never out for blood. And I think in today's world, to answer that question, if the fighting community would have accepted him and given him time to see how great he was, they would have understood what he was doing for his life, for his legacy, for his future. They would have accepted that. I just don't know if today's time they would have gave him the time to figure out who he is and how special he was. They'd have been like, boo, throw a punch, this, that. It would have taken too much time, and there's no patience right now. If you don't start your career with a bang, and fans don't have patience anymore for that. Obviously the last 2 guys that had any sort of close to what Willie, you got to go to Sweet Pea and obviously Mayweather. I mean, those guys were defensive masters, and I mean, there's many more. Those are the 2 off my head. But I think if the boxing world would have given Willie more time and understood what he was doing, how special he was, he would have succeeded. He would have succeeded. He'd be like, oh my God, he's not getting.
I think he would have had to have been unbeatable, right? That's what made Pernell Whitaker a star. That is what made Floyd a star. Nobody really watched these guys because they were you're not going to get the same type of entertainment that gets tight like Tyson or Gotti or any of those guys that gave you an absolute war. But if you were impossible to beat, it's like Floyd always said, you would have had people watching to see you lose. And it doesn't matter as long as they're watching. As long as those eyeballs are still on their TV and those pay-per-view buys are still going through the system, it really doesn't make that much of a difference.
Yeah, and he's sharp. Look, he kept his wits. He kept his
Yep.
wits. Willie was sharp to the very end. He didn't take all those punches. And the same thing with Floyd. I mean, they're not taking the hits. And they want a life after this career. So, life after boxing.
I wonder how many landed punches would have been between Sweet Pea and Willie Pep. I'm going to go like the over-under is like 16 and a half, like between those two guys.
Probably. Oh, my God, I would love to see that.
Those defensive wizards. James, great stuff, man. Good luck with the movie and the premiere next week out in Los Angeles. And I appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you, pal.